Okay. Okay, so give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to come on, but I actually can't read this I'm sorry, this is like really embarrassing, but I need reading glasses and I don't have them. So I can't, I'm not going on camera. You'll just bear with me as I try and read this small thing on my screen that I can't actually see. So I'm sorry, Nechama, in advance. So of course, Nechama, who really needs no introduction, is the director of Yeshiva University's graduate program for advanced Talmud studies, from which she earned certification in 2003. She's a senior lecturer in the Bible and Judaic Studies departments at Stern College, where she's been teaching since 2004. She earned a master's degree in Jewish education from Azrieli Graduate School and an MA in Bible from the Bernard Revel Graduate School. She's also a graduate of the inaugural class of the American branch of Nishmat's Yoetzet Halacha program and currently serves as Yoetzet Halacha in our community, of course, and also in Englewood, Tenafly, and Long Branch, New Jersey. She is a community scholar and speaks all over North America. She lives in Bergenfield with her husband and 4 children, and we're really, really excited to have her. So without further ado.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Dara, for putting this all together and for inviting me to once again give another share to this community. I love being the Yoetzet Halacha of your communities, I should say, Livingston and West Orange. It's been, I think this is our 8th year, which is really exciting. I was trying to calculate how many shiurim I've given to your community, which is amazing. And Ken Yerbu should be a lot more. But everyone should remember on the Zoom, if you have any shilas in Hilchos Nida, mikvah, sexuality, fertility, send them my way. Don't hesitate to call me. My number is posted everywhere, my email address, so never hesitate. I'm going to give you a share tonight, however, in having to do with this week's parsha. I'm just going to share screen right now with you. I'm hearing a bit of an echo, so if anyone is not muted, I would appreciate it.
Why don't you make me the co-host again, and then I'll mute anyone who needs to be. This way you don't have to deal with that.
Okay, so I have to stop share to do that.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Give me 1 second. It seems I can only make you host, so don't worry.
Okay, so I'll make me host, and then I'll make you the co-host.
Okay, see if that works. Make me co-host or else I can't share screen.
Right, of course.
Your host.
I just have to figure out how to do that. Make co-host, here we go.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to share screen again. Can everybody see my screen? Those who have their pictures up, give me thank you, a thumbs up. Hold on, I'm just fixing my video now so I could see faces. Okay, perfect. Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, now that we've worked this all out, I wanted to discuss with you, starting from, I guess, this week's Parsha and the past week's Parsha, put it all together to ask a number of questions about Yosef and Moshe and their maybe possible identity crisis. So I wanted to start off my share by asking you the following question having to do with this week's Parsha, which is in this week's Parsha, we all know Moshe is born, Moshe is chosen to be the leader of Am Yisrael. And the question that I was always wondering is, why him? What is it about him? Why is it that God chooses him? Why is it that God insists that it has to be him? He says no over and over and over again at the SNET, but Hashem seems to insist this has to be Moshe Rabbeinu. And the question is, what is it about Moshe that makes it that he's the perfect one for the job? But before I get to that question, which I'll come back to at the very end, I want to ask a second question, which is as follows. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu, and in the story where he's chosen to lead Am Yisrael, is 80 years old. And for majority of his life, he spent it outside of being part of the Jewish people. He spends it being in Mitzri, then he spends it being a Midjan person. And the question is, during all of that time, who does he think he is? Does he think he's Jewish? Does he think he's Egyptian? Does he think he's a Midjan man? Like, what does he identify with in terms of who he is as a person? And I think the exact same question that we ask about Moshe Rabbeinu, we can ask about Yosef as well, who we just finished learning about in the Parsha. You know, he's away from home for at least 22 years. And the question is, while he's in Mitzrayim, how did he view himself? Did he see himself as part of the family of Yaakov, you know, a Jewish person going to be part of the Jewish nation? Or did he view himself as an Egyptian? And I think that when you look at Moshe Rabbeinu and the story of Yosef HaTzadik as well, you could look at them in two very different ways. The way I think that we normally learn and the way that we teach our children is that Yosef and Moshe never wavered. They viewed themselves as Jewish from the beginning to the end. Of course, they were living amongst non-Jews, but that's not how they viewed themselves at all. And they just waited. They were waiting for the day that they could return to the Jewish people. But I wonder if there is a second perspective. And that second perspective is that they struggled. And there were moments that they associated themselves as part of other nationalities. And they looked at themselves as something outside of the Jewish people. And of course, at the end of the story, they returned to the Jewish nation. But the question of, did they view themselves that way the whole time, I think can be questioned throughout their stories. So what I want to do with you today is go through the story of Yosef and go through the story of Moshe with these two different perspectives and try to see how we can feel and understand the struggles of Moshe and the struggles of Yosef throughout their time in Galus, and to understand if there's messages that we can take from there to apply to ourselves. So going in chronological order, I'm going to start with Yosef, and hopefully you see him on the source sheet in front of me. When we start the Yosef story, you know, we all know the beginning of the Yosef story here in source number 1. Eila told us Yaakov, Yosef. Yosef is the favorite of Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov, and all it lists is Yosef. And it seems he from the start is not just the favorite, but the one who is chosen for leadership. One of the interpretations of Haya ro'et achav batzon, he shepherded his brothers with the sheep, he bossed them around, right? Especially the end, Huna Eretz b'nei Bilha b'nei Zilpa, which can be looked at as well as he kind of bossed them around. They had to babysit him and watch him. He used to tattle on his brothers. He acted as if he was superior to them. Pasuk Gimel Yisrael Ahavat Yosef mikol banav. He's the favorite of his father. His father loves him the most. Ben Zikunim, as Ramban says, it means he's the one chosen to hang out with his dad the most. And of course, what does Yaakov do? He gives him a beautiful ketonet pasim, probably a coat that shows leadership, a coat that shows love. I think we've had shiurim on this before, right? And therefore, clearly, Yosef views himself as the head of the household, probably the continuation of the household, the chosen son of his father. I'm sure his father used to whisper to him or talk to him about the future and how he's going to be the head of this Jewish nation, this Jewish people that he learned about from his father and from Avram Avinu. And Yosef had this picture in his head of what he was going to be. And therefore, it's not a surprise that Yosef starts dreaming about leading his brothers and his brothers bowing down to him, because I'm sure that was the assumption he had from everything his father did, and all the favoritism he got from his father, all the attention he got from his father, and of course, things his father said and did for him. So therefore, Yosef has this assumption and has this beautiful dream, at least in his mind. He's the leader of his family, and of course, he's going to lead Am Yisrael. But as we all know, as the psukim continue here, Pasuk Dalet, brothers don't agree. They hate him. They continue to hate him. They hate him even more after every single dream that he tells. And they are jealous of him. And of course, this clash between what Yosef thinks is going to be the dream of Yosef and the brothers' hatred and jealousy does not go very well. And at the end, Yosef is thrown into a pit. Yosef is sold as a slave, and Yosef ends up in Mitzrayim. And the question that we now have, even though we know he had these dreams, we know he dreamt of being the leader of Am Yisrael. Did those dreams change? When all of a sudden everything came crashing down, did Yosef hold on to those dreams, or did Yosef let those dreams go? And it's very clear from the psukim whether the brothers sold Yosef or not, right? There's a big debate. Did the Midyanim sell him? Did the brothers sell him? Technically, it really doesn't matter. Source number 2, Yosef really thought they sold him. He twice says to them, Asher machartam oti Mitzrayim, you sold me to Mitzrayim, or again later, Ki machartam oti hena, you sold me here. Yosef's assumption was that the brothers sold him. So the question is, how did he view his brothers after this? Did he want to be part of this family? We really can't blame him if he says, you know what, a family that throws me in a pit and a family that sells me as a slave, I really want nothing to do with them anymore. And therefore, there is a possibility that for a period of time, Yosef replaces his dreams with new dreams. Yosef wanted to lead, and that's part of his blood. That's who he is. But he replaces those dreams with dreams of leadership of Mitzrayim. That's where he lives. So he dreamt of being the head of Potiphar's household. And then when he's thrown into jail, he dreamt dreams of coming out of jail and being a leader amongst Egypt. And that's, of course, what came true for him. It is possible he replaced his old dreams with brand new dreams. And not only did he replace his dreams, he replaces his identity. If you look at source number 3, it is possible to understand that when he becomes second in command in Mitzrayim, his whole identity changes. Pharaoh changes his name to Safnat Paneach, which if you look at Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, this is a Mitzri name. It's an Egyptian name. He got a new Egyptian identity. Not only did he get an Egyptian identity, he marries an Egyptian woman. And not just is she any Egyptian woman, twice in the pasuk, I underlined and bolded. You see my arrow moving? I just want to make sure that everything is moving. Beautiful. We see from the text, she is the daughter of Kohen On. She is the daughter of a priest. She's the daughter of somebody who's important in Mitzrayim. When you want to be a leader in some place, you want yichus, you want connection to other leaders within that place. So he creates for himself this brand new identity and has for himself a new Egyptian family. And when he has his first son, if you look at the name Menashe here in Pasuk Nen Aleph, what does he name his first son? Ki nashani Elokim es kol amali ves kol beit avi. Thank you, Hashem, for letting me forget all of my troubles and my father's home. What is the first thing he thanks Hashem for? Thank you for letting me forget this terrible past that I have. Thank you for letting me move on and create this new life for myself. And therefore he names his second son, thank you. Thank you for letting me be successful here. Thank you for letting me create this new life for myself and probably an even better life for myself than he imagined. I'm not just a leader of a family. I'm a leader of the most powerful country in the entire world. Thank you, Hashem, for letting me forget my past, that horrible past, and letting me create new memories and a brand new identity and a brand new life and a brand new dream. And therefore, it sounds like one could argue that at this point, Yosef is happy. Yosef is happy in Mitzrayim. He has a brand new life. He has forgotten his past and he's moved on. I'm not saying in any way he's not a God-fearing person. He speaks about God all the time. God is with him with all his successes. Every time he interprets a dream, he speaks about God, but it doesn't necessarily mean he believes he's going to return to his family, to the children of Yaakov. And therefore, it kind of makes a lot of sense if you look at it this way, where he feels connected to God, but he doesn't feel any connection anymore to his family, it answers the really difficult question of when he became second to king, why did he not call his dad? Why did he not send messengers back to his father to tell him that he was alive? How come he never connects? Because he didn't want to. It's the simplest answer. Why would you want to connect to a family who sold you as a slave? Why would you want to connect to a father who allowed this to occur and sent you out to the field that day to your brothers? And therefore, it's possible he has totally disconnected. And he was hoping to never see them again. He wanted nothing to do with his family. But as we all know, second year of the famine happened, source number 4, and the brothers appear in front of him. And if you look at the psukim, you can actually see the same story coming through. Vayar Yosef et achav. He sees his brother, Vayakirem. Oh no, he recognizes them. Here they are. I never want to see them again, but here they are. They're right in front of me. So what do? Vayitznat keralehem. I disguise myself. I don't want them to know it's me. All right. If you're Yosef and you can't wait to see your brothers and you're, hi guys, here I am. I'm Yosef. No, I don't want them. I want to get rid of them. I want nothing to do with them. And therefore, what am I going to do? Disguise myself. But now I disguise myself, I want to get rid of them. That is my goal. Before we get back to what he does to them, we look very carefully at Pasuk Tet. He remembers the dream. What's the assumption when you read, I remember something? It tells me I forgot it and now I remember it. Yosef has put the dreams, his dreams of the brothers bowing bowing down to him long in the past. This is not something I dream about anymore. I have new dreams. But now when they're standing in front of me, bowing in front of me, what comes back? These memories that I've pushed away, that I've pushed aside. Oh my goodness, remember those dreams? Remember those dreams I used to have when I was a kid? Why do I have to remember them? Because I have forgotten them. But what does he do? Instead of responding and saying, here I am, guys, I'm Yosef, or even just screaming at them, he acts in the weirdest of ways. And if you look at what he does, it really does seem like he's trying to get rid of them. And the reason why, as Radak points out, why does he not want them to know who he is? Because he's mad at them. They wanted to kill him. They threw him in the pit and they made him into a slave. So he does not want anything to do with them. So what does he do? Let's look at the psukim. He yells at them. He speaks to them very meanly. And we, of course, know what he does to them next. He throws them into jail. Why would he throw them into jail? Makes no sense. He throws them into jail because he wants them to understand that he's crazy a little bit. And this guy that they have no idea who he is has the ability to just punish for absolutely no reason. They come in, they haven't done anything, and all of a sudden he throws them into jail. And what does he want them to do? To be so scared to return. He never wants them to come back because he wants nothing to do with them at this point in the story. So he throws them into jail. What does he do next? He returns their money into their bags, because what's the message he's saying? Well, if I threw you into jail when you didn't do anything, well, now you actually did something. You stole all the food. So now I really have permission to throw you into jail for even a longer time. So of course they're going to be too scared to come back. And then of course, what does he do to really make sure they don't come back? He tells them to bring down Binyamin, because he knows that is the last thing his father is ever going to let them do. Come back with Binyamin? No way. He's like, I know Yaakov. He's never going to let them come back if they have to come back with Binyamin. I've now sealed the deal. But he does one more thing to make sure that they will never ever return. It's a little bit strange, but if you think about it for more than a minute, it makes sense. He keeps Shimon in jail. Why does he keep Shimon in jail? Well, it makes sense he keeps one of them in jail because he's trying to say, I will keep one of you forever. So the Yaakov, when they come home and say, we need to bring Binyamin, will say, are you joking me? He kept Shimon. There is a chance he's never going to let Binyamin leave. No way. I will never let you bring Binyamin. And you see that in source number 5, that when the brothers are talking to Yaakov, he does not assume Shimon's coming back. He says to them, Yosef einenu, Yosef is gone. Shimon einenu, Shimon is gone. He's never coming back. So the assumption of Yaakov is this crazy guy who took Shimon probably killed him or will never release him from jail. So there is zero chance Yaakov is ever going to let them take Binyamin down. And this seems to be his goal, and it fits the psukim beautifully. His goal is to scare them so badly that they leave and they never come back. Of course, he never assumed they were going to come back, but then they do. And then when they come back with Binyamin, he's kind of surprised. But at that point, what he's trying to do is keep Binyamin because that's his brother. So he wants to keep Binyamin. So he puts the goblet in the bag. And then everything shifts in the story because Yehuda has his famous speech in Parshas Vayigash. And it is very unclear what is it about what Yehuda said that changes everything. But something changes everything. It could be that Yehuda reveals that Yaakov thinks Yosef is dead. It could be that Yehuda reveals, or all of the above actually, that Yehuda reveals that the brothers have changed, that the brothers are sorry for what they did with Yosef. It could be how much respect they have for Binyamin and how it is clear to Yosef they've changed, or Yehuda's words, take me instead of Binyamin. I don't know which one it is. And again, it could be all of those things that makes Yosef change his mind drastically, meaning up until this point, Yosef does not want to return to his family. Yosef has a new dream. He's going to be the king of Egypt. He has nothing to do with his family. He wants them to leave and never to return. And this explains why in that moment, after the speech of Yehuda, if you look at source number 6, the reaction of Yosef when he changes everything and reveals himself on Yosef is so crazy strong and emotional. I mean, he breaks so hard. He can't handle it anymore. He sends everybody out of the room. He screams so loud that the entire Egypt hears. Why? If this was something he was planning to do, what is this emotional crazy that's going on? It's because he never planned it. It wasn't in the plan. He was supposed to be strong. He was supposed to kick them out. He never wanted to see them again. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, I do want to be part of this family. I do want to return. So his reaction is so emotional because it's something he never imagined he was going to do. And then at this point, he totally changes. And this is, of course, where it becomes the Yosef that we know, the Yosef who turns everything around 100% and says, okay, you're right. I want to be part of this family. I want to save my family. That dream of Egypt is gone now. I want to go back to my original dream. And you see it within the psukim because all of a sudden he gets so excited. Source number 7. Okay, you have to move to Goshen. You'll be close to me. And he goes on to say, you know, why do I want to give you Goshen? It's the Meitav Haaretz. It's the most beautiful part of the land. And as the psukim continue to tell us last week, well, two parshiot ago, how Yosef is giving out all the food to Mitzrayim and charging everyone money, not us. Source number 9, he feeds everybody, he takes care of us, doesn't charge us anything, and causes that we become a strong nation. Vayifru, vayirbu ma'od, we multiply, we become many. Egypt becomes impoverished, and the Jewish people are able to succeed. It's fascinating. It's a change in the storyline, which to me is just so incredible, which is he thought it was over. He thought he wasn't part of this family anymore. They rejected him, so he rejected them. And then when they come back and he sees that they have changed, and he sees that their values are so strong, he returns to the family. But then we're left with last week's parsha. And there's a funny question that I've always had about last week's parsha, which is we have two different prakim of brachot. Yaakov gives a bracha to Yosef and Ephraim and Menashe, that's in Perek Mem Chet. And then he gives a bracha in Perek Mem Tet to all the brothers, including Yosef. So the question is, if he's going to bless Yosef in Perek Mem Tet amongst all the brothers, what's Perek Mem Chet? Why is Yosef getting an additional bracha? And I think within this version of the story, Perek Mem Chet is very powerful because it's very nice that Yosef has now decided in Perek Mem Hey, Ani Yosef, I want to return. I'm not Safna Paneach anymore. I'm Yosef. It's a turnaround. My identity has changed. I want to come back. The question is, do we want him back? He's been Egyptian for so long. He's been in their environment for so long. His children are Egyptian. He has an Egyptian wife. The Malbim even says that when Yaakov turns to Yosef and says, Mi Ela, who are these children? Who are they? That the question there he's asking is, they're wearing Egyptian clothes. I mean, who are they? Who are they really? And therefore, Perek Mem Chet is the question of, will Yosef and his children be accepted back? Are they going to be part of Am Yisrael? That's the question. And that's what Yaakov says to Yosef in source number 10, when he re-gives him the bracha, right? Look at the bracha he gives to Yosef. I'll make you many, and I'll give you Eretz Yisrael. That's the bracha God gave to Abraham. That's the bracha that was given to Yitzchak, and the bracha given to Yaakov. He's repeating the bracha. He's saying, you're back in. You're back in the fold. You get to be part again. And not only you, Ephraim and Menashe are like Reuven and Shimon. Ephraim and Menashe are accepted as well. There was a question. There was a fear. Am I back in or am I not? And this is captured so beautifully by the Midrash in source number 11. I'll read you a bit of it. Chamisha Devarim Her Yosef Belibo. Yosef was worried about a bunch of things. One of them was, Banai noldu b'Mitzrayim. My sons were born in Mitzrayim. Tamar shivachem. Is Yaakov going to bless them? Are they going to be part? Tamar sheyaseu tam shvatim. Are they going to be tribes? Are we going to be allowed back in? Lo yuchal lerot. Yaakov wasn't able to see. That's the pasuk. Nista kamim and Ruach HaKodesh. She's trying to give a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe, but the Ruach HaKodesh just won't come to him. He can't give the bracha. Yosef starts to get upset. Hitzchel Yosef mavakesh v'amarlo. Yosef starts to beg him and ask him. But Nai said he came him to no, Dad, my sons, they really are righteous. I promise they're righteous. And my wife Asat, she's righteous. Please accept us back in. Please give them a bracha. And the Medrash goes on. Yaakov starts to hug them and to kiss them, and he's praying, please, let me be able to give them a bracha. But the Ruach HaKodesh just doesn't come. He can't give them a bracha. Back where I bolded. He gets so upset, Yosef, he goes outside the room and he falls on his face. He starts davening to Hashem. Please, Hashem, come on. We are good people. Let us back in. And of course, Hashem, whatever that means, turns to the Ruach HaKodesh and says, enough. Go back to Yaakov, and Yaakov goes and blesses them. But what you see in this version of the story is that what happened in last week's Parsha was Yosef being accepted back in. And it's a beautiful story at the end. But in this story, Yosef does leave his family behind for a period of time. The second version of the story, which is probably more in line with what we've learned our entire lives, which is the story of Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous, who's been the same Yosef the entire time through and through, always associated with the Jewish people and never wavered at all. We see that, of course, in this week's Parsha, in source here number 12, where in the very beginning of our Parsha, it kind of recaps all the Shvatim and who comes down to Mitzrayim. And it has the really weird phrase, the Yosef Hayab Mitzrayim. And of course, Rashi asks, as do many of the Mefarshim, Yosef is in Mitzrayim? Like, when is it? Duh, we all know that. Don't we all know he was in Mitzrayim? Really? The pasuk has to tell me he was in Mitzrayim? This famous line to teach us that Yosef was always a tzaddik through and through. Who Yosef haratzon aviv, who Yosef shaya b'Mitzrayim v'nasa melech b'omei b'tzidko. The same Yosef that shepherded the sheep is the same Yosef who was the king of Mitzrayim. He was a tzaddik the entire time through and through. And the question, of course, would be, yes, he gets sold down to Mitzrayim. That would be this version. And even when he's sold down, he still holds on to the idea, I have these dreams. I'm going to lead my family. I'm holding on to those dreams. And that is what I'm going to be. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to get back there. I don't know, but I'm holding strong to the vision of my family, to the values of my family and who my family is. And you see that coming through in the Psukim a bit in the story when he encounters Eshet Potiphar. In the story in source 13 of Eshet Potiphar, where she tries to seduce him. And of course he says no over and over again in that one day that she tries to force herself upon him. And he says, I can't do this. How can I do this to your husband? But then that line, the Chatasi Lalokim, it will be a sin to my God, which God? The Jewish God, the God that says that this is not okay. And there Hadak as well brings it down. What do we see from here? Lahodia Tzidkaso Shel Yosef. This is the Yosef. This is the tzaddik Yosef who was able to go, fight against his Yetzer Hara to keep to his Jewish values. And the question here is, obviously this shows that he has these values, but how does it really show that he connects back to his family? And I really wonder, within all of these stories, we see a lot of Yosef remembering his family and thinking about his family. And in that sense, maybe one could argue, which is the vision of Yosef we always had, he's always thinking about them. He always wants to go back to them. And that's captured very beautifully, source 14 in the Gemara in Sota. It's a really beautiful Gemara. Eshet Potiphar is trying to seduce him. And the Gemara says, he all of a sudden sees the vision of his father. And, it's unclear what that means. It's kind of like, for those who've seen Lion King, the Mufasa moment, where the dad's like, be who you're supposed to be, But I always wondered if it's a window. So it's him seeing himself, and he looks like his father, and everything that he sees reminds him of home, because he's the Yosef that's never detached. He's the Yosef that's always pining for his dad. He's the Yosef that wants his life back. So when he looks into the mirror, what does he see? He sees his dad, and he says, oh my gosh, this is not something my dad would approve of. This is not the life that my dad wanted me to have. And why in that moment did he remember his family, remember his dad? If you look at source 15, when Shiva Tikbisheu Bigdo, when she grabs his clothes, I'm sure it reminded him of a story that happened to him with his brothers when Vayipshitu as Yosef is Kotonato. She removes his coat just like they removed his coat when they threw him into the pit. Everything seems to remind him of his family. Everything reminds him of his past, because that's what he thinks about all the time. If you look at source 16, when he's talking in jail, that's always so interesting to me, right? Because if I was Yosef and somebody said to me, Yosef, can you interpret dreams? If I was Yosef, I would say, I am the worst at interpreting dreams. Please don't tell me your dreams. I interpreted my dream that I was going to be the leader of my family. And what happened to me? I am now in jail in Egypt. I am wrong. I don't know how to interpret dreams. But clearly, if you take the story of Yosef, that he grabbed onto that dream, I'm going to lead my family, and he held onto it tight and said, even though I'm in jail in Egypt, I'm still going to lead my family. I know I'm going to return to them. I know it's going to come true. That's the Yosef who could turn to Sarah Mashkib, Sarah Ophim, and later to Paro and say, tell me your dream, because I know how to interpret dreams. And that's exactly what he does, which is really incredible. He has this belief that he knows how to interpret dreams. And when he's talking to the Sarah Mashkib in source 16, everything takes him back to his family. That's all he talks about. Look what he says to him. I was stolen from the land of the Ivrim. Here in Egypt, I didn't do anything wrong. Because they put me in the pit. Now, clearly here he's saying to him, because they put me in jail. But what language does he use? They put me in the pit, taking him back to the story of his brothers. Everything reminds him of his brothers. And therefore, we have a very different version of the story right now. The Yosef who's holding on tight, the Yosef who wants to go back to his family, the Yosef who always associates himself as Yosef, the son of Yaakov, the one who's going to lead the Jewish people, and he's holding on to that dream. And therefore, what do I do with the change of identity? And I don't think that's very difficult. If I go to source 17, look closely at the pasuk, Yosef doesn't change his name, Paro changes his name. So it could be Paro says your official title is now Safna Paneach, but we call him Yosef, and he probably called himself Yosef. That's who he identified with. Or I could look at Rasag and Ramban who say, no, Safna Paneach is a Hebrew word. It's Mikales Funot, the one who reveals visions. And therefore says Ramban, probably what happened is they said, where are you coming from? What's your language? Let's name you something in your own language. So he was associating himself the entire time. Not only that, him marrying Asnat. So again, you say Paro picked his wife and he really didn't have a choice of who he was supposed to marry. But what I do find really interesting is this beautiful midrash that I gave you here in source 18, where the midrash says, no, do you know who Asnat was according to Chazal? And again, this is all Chazal's view of trying to keep Yosef always associated with his family. But really who Asnat is the daughter of Dinah. You see, Dinah, when she was with Shem, got pregnant. And when Shechem was killed and Shimon and Levi, bring Dinah back, Dinah had a baby. And this baby was kind of in trouble because the brothers weren't treating it very nicely. So Hashem sent down, this is Midrash, sent down a Malach of Michal who grabbed this baby and brought her to Mitzrayim to live in the house of Potiphar, ready and waiting there for when Yosef would come down to Mitzrayim so he would marry Asnat. What is this Midrash coming to tell us? I don't know if this is true, but what's the Midrash telling us? What is it? Who's the only person that Yosef can marry? Of course, it has to be someone from the family of Yaakov because Yosef always wanted to associate with the family of Yaakov. I love the language of the Chizkuni that I will read for you inside, and because the Medrash makes it as like a coincidence. Chizkuni, no. Yosef picked her. Yosef knew her true identity. Yosef knew she was the granddaughter of Yaakov, so he married her on purpose. Yosef wanted to marry somebody from the family of Yaakov. And then again, I look at the names of his children. Is it that he really disassociated, or can I read it the exact opposite? If I look at source 19, if I was picking from Yosef's perspective, if he really didn't want to care about his family anymore, I kind of would have flipped the names. I would have said, my first son, Ephraim, thank you, Hashem, for my amazing success here. That's my top priority, my new life, right? But that's not what he does. His first naming, his first child is, thank you for letting me forget my father's home. What is he really saying? I didn't forget him at all. He's my top priority. He's what I think about every single day. My oldest son is named for the fact that I forgot, but I really didn't forget my father's home. My father's home is always my first priority. My success here in Mitzrayim is secondary because that's not really my goal. That's not really my dream. So if I look at Yosef from the second perspective, which I think we always thought of, which is Yosef, of course, always wanted to return home, then you have to face the biggest problem. He obviously doesn't contact his family. And of course, when they come, he doesn't tell them who he is, and it doesn't make any sense. But let me look at the psukim with you and try to understand how this all makes sense. If you look at source number 20, same psukim again, but I'll focus on it differently. If you look at the psukim, there's repetition. Vayakirim, he recognizes them. Pasachat vayaker Yosef et achav, he recognizes them. And the question is, why twice? He recognizes them, like it seems very repetitive. And I think it's possible to look into the language a little bit and to say, maybe this is what's going on. It's one thing to recognize someone. You're not looking for them and you bump into someone, you recognize them. Okay, so that's one vayaker. Maybe what's vayakarim, vayaker? I'm looking for you. Meaning it's very possible that once Yosef became second in command in Mitzrayim, he didn't have to call his parents. He didn't have to call his dad because he knew that in the second year of famine, they were going to come to him. They were going to run out of food. Every single person who needed food came to Yosef. He knew they were going to come. So what's the Vayakirein Vayaker? He looked. Every time a foreigner came from outside of Egypt, he was staring at them. Could you be Reuven? Could you be Shimon? Maybe you're Levi? Are you one of my brothers? And then finally, there they are. There they are, double language. Here they are, they're in front of him. And this language of Vayiskor Yosef es chalamot asher chalam lahem. I know I said to you before, Vayiskor means I forget and then I remember. But in Tanakh, that's not always true. Vayiskor very often doesn't mean I forgot. Vayizkor sometimes means now's the time. Now's the time we've been waiting for. I gave you 3 examples here. Vayizkor Elokim et Noach. Right? God remembers Noach and tells him to come out of the teva. Do you really think God forgot the one and only human being on earth that God saved? Right? He saved one whole family. You think God forgot him and then was like, oh, right, remember that guy? I told him to build a teva. Maybe I should let him out. No, it's Vayizkor. Now's the moment that God's like, okay, Noach, it's time to come out. Vayizkor Elokim et Rachel. Did he forget Rachel? Or now is the time he's letting her have her first baby? Or this week's parsha, Vayishma Elokim es nakasam, Vayizkor Elokim es brito. He remembers the Brit. Really? He forgot us in Mitzrayim? We're suffering all this time. He forgot? No, now is the time. He's picking Moshe and letting us come out. Sometimes Vayizkor means now's the moment that it's coming, what I've been waiting for this whole time. And therefore, Vayizkor Yosef es achalam motze shechalam. It's not I forgot, now I remember. It's here it is. Here's the dream I've been holding on to my entire life, waiting for it to come true. And here are my brothers bowing down before me. They finally have arrived. My dreams have come true. Of course, the biggest problem is, so there, where is Ani Yosef, right? That should be next. What's going on? And the Mefarshim have a really hard time with this. So I'm not really going to solve it for you other than to suggest a few suggestions. This can be a sheer unto itself, trying to understand what Yosef was doing. But to throw out to you a number of answers to this problem, because these Mefarshim will assume, of course, Yosef always wanted to reveal himself. So what's with the delay? What's with all the crazy of throwing them in jail and bringing back Binyamin? What's with all that? The first view that I want to present you here is the famous Ramban, which I'm going to do this fairly quickly for time. But according to the Ramban, Yosef really believed his dreams had to come true, and they had to come true in order. And therefore, the first dream was about all 11 brothers bowing to him. And then the second dream was his brothers and his father bowing down to him. So he needed to bring Binyamin down to bow down to him before he could bring down his father. And if he said Ani Yosef, Yaakov would come down and Binyamin would not come down on his own. I find this Ramban to be a bit difficult, but if you understand the Ramban, as the Ramban is saying, then that does make sense. If you said Ani Yosef, Yaakov would come down right away. And this last line that I underlined here, I want to read to you. What happened to Yosef was when the dream of Paro came true, he interpreted Paro's dream and it came true. Meaning what happened was, as soon as the Paro's dream came true, he's like, now I know mine are coming true. Now I know. So he kind of wanted to create a scenario where his dreams could come true. The Abarbanel takes a very different approach, and the Abarbanel actually has a number of approaches. This is one of many approaches the Abarbanel brings down, but I like this one, where it's not that Yosef automatically wanted to reveal himself. Yosef had a lot of steikot. He had a lot of doubts. He had a lot of questions. He didn't understand what happened, and he wanted to kind of test them. He wanted to bring a nisayon to them to kind of see who are the brothers. What did they think about what they did to him? Are they sorry for what they did to him? So he kind of tests them by putting them through the charade of not letting them know that he's Yosef. Nechama Leibowitz and the Akedas Yitzchak builds off this approach of Abarbanel. And Nechama Leibowitz very famously, I gave you a quote from here, says it's not just he was testing them, he actually wanted them to do tshuva. And as we all know from the Rambam, the ultimate way to do tshuva is not just to be sorry, but to have the same situation occur again and choose not to do the same thing you did the first time. So Yosef was trying to create that for them. And I just read you what I bolded. In other words, a man must be confronted by the same temptation to which he had previously succumbed. If he stands the test and resists, he has proven his mettle. So what she goes on to say is that it can't be that he tests them through himself. Right? Let's see if they'll attack me. If I say Ani Yosef, will they attack? Well, of course not. He's the king. They can't attack him. He's got guards. So that doesn't make any sense. So he had to use Binyamin as the test. And because Binyamin was very similar to him, the favorite of his father from the same mother. So therefore, Yosef tried to come out with this a test for them that actually would be a tshuva moment for them. And therefore, he chooses to do that through his brother Binyamin. And that is the theory of Nechama Leibowitz, that he was actually getting them through the process of tshuva. I'd like to suggest another suggestion, which is if you line up what the brothers do to Yosef to what Yosef does to them, it actually lines up pretty nicely. So let's see what he does to them, right? In our story, the first thing he does is he calls them spies, right? Miraklimatem, you are spies. That's the first thing he does. And if you think about it, that's probably very similar to what they did to him. Because if we go back to the psukim I read in the beginning of the shir, Yosef used to tattle on them, right? Yosef he would tattle on them. Well, just think about every scenario where one kid tattles on the other, right? One kid tattles. What does the other kid say? You spied on me in order to get me into trouble, right? I am sure they accused him of being a spy over and over again, and therefore he says, you're spies. If I go to the next thing he does, he puts them into jail. Well, that's very similar to the fact they threw him in a pit, right? So that's pretty similar. And then, of course, he returns the money into their sacks, making them robbers where they didn't end up paying for the food that they had. And that, of course, lines up very nicely to what they did to him. When they sold him, he even describes it as Gano Ganati, they stole me. And if you look at the sale, assuming that it's them, when they sell Yosef, they get money for him. They didn't own him. They didn't have the right to that money. So they literally stole. So he creates the situation of them being robbers. And then, of course, at the end, makes them bring Binyamin down. And when they bring Binyamin down, he treats Binyamin nicer and he gives Binyamin extra stuff. And that's, of course, reaction to the fact that when he was a child and his father favored him, they did not react so nicely. And the question here is, when I look at this chart, the first thing that falls out, that you think about is revenge. He's taking revenge. All the things you did to me, I'm doing to you. And that actually fits very nicely into my first theory, right? If he wanted them to leave and go away, maybe he took some revenge on them before he sent them away. But if I'm looking at this from the second theory, which is he really wanted to reunite with them, you have to ask, what was the point? What was the point of doing this? And I think by looking at this chart, what you see here, which I think is a new perspective of how to look at what Yosef did, is that clearly he thought about what he was going to do. This wasn't like a rash decision of, throw you into jail. He thought it through. This was plan by plan. He knew they were going to come down one day. He knew he was going to see them, and he wanted them to go through what he went through. Why would he want that? Again, not revenge, but rather, if you think about it from a psychological perspective, when somebody experiences a trauma, when somebody experiences such a negative experience, in order for you to reconnect to those people who put you in that situation, they need to feel what you felt. They need to understand what you went through. And very often when you experience something that's really traumatic, in order to get through it, you need others to understand what you went through. And it's very possible, which shows us how Yosef really wanted to come back. So he needed to create a scenario. Think about it. He never hurts them. Not once. Nothing he does to them hurts. He throws them in jail, takes them out of jail. He makes them feel like robbers. He makes them feel or accuses them of being spies. He doesn't hurt them. It's all psychological. He's confusing them. He's making them feel things. He's confused. He's making them go through the emotional turmoil of what he went through. And it's very possible to understand is that if he wanted to return, he needed them to understand what he went through. And even more so than I can argue that the fact that he kept Shimon in jail was his insurance that they were going to return. If you go through all the tribes, which I'm very into the tribes, I've just recently come out with a book on the tribes, he wouldn't have taken Reuven because Reuven was a loner. Probably nobody would have returned for Reuven. He knew he couldn't take Yehuda because Yehuda is the one who had to get his dad, to agree to let them take down Binyamin. He wouldn't take down Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. They're the servant children. No one's going to return for them. Yisachar and Zevulun are too quiet. No one's returning for them either. Who does he know will get a rescue mission? That's Shimon, because Shimon and Levi went on a rescue mission to save their sister Dinah. You can't separate Shimon from Levi. They are that troublesome duo together. He knew that if he kept Shimon, at some point, the brothers were going to figure out a way. The brothers were going to return. And therefore, this was all part of Yosef's plan. He wanted them to return. He wanted them to understand what he went through or go through a tshuva process or understand what they were thinking during that time, whatever the reason is. But he knew he was going to reveal himself to them, and he knew he was going to return. And you see that connectivity that he feels from them by pasuk after pasuk within the story of him asking them, how's his father? How's the family? How are people doing? Look at source 23. Sha'ol sha'al ha'ish lanu. The man asked us, ha'od avichai yesh lanu ach? Is your dad alive? Do you have a brother? Later on, source 24, he asks again, Vayomer ha'shalom avicham hazakain. How's your dad doing? When they came down the second time. Or 25, when he says, Ani Yosef, what's the next words? Ha'od avicham chai? How's my dad? I've been thinking about my dad. dad my whole life. And of course, when he meets up with Binyamin, source 26, he wants to cry so badly when he sees Binyamin. He has to leave the room and cry privately because he's so emotionally attached to his family, but he just wasn't ready to reveal himself yet. But once he reveals himself in this scenario, oh, is he excited. I mean, this is his dream come true. This is the dream he's been holding on for such a period of time that he's been waiting and waiting. So look at his language. Maharu, quickly go, get my father, and you'll be close to me. Don't wait, please go. I'll give you everything you want. Mahartam, go quickly. Come on, bring dad down already. I can't wait anymore. And then, of course, he falls on his brother's face and he cries and he kisses them. It's such an emotional thing for Yosef because this is what he's been waiting for. I just add in one more piece from Chazal to kind of capture this approach. Source 28, when his father sees the agalot, comes the medrash to say it's because Yosef remembers the last thing he was learning together with his father, which was Egla Arufa. And that captures that picture of Yosef remembered every last detail, right? Every single thing about his family was first and foremost on his mind. But then we return, of course, to what's the difference between Perek Memchet and Perek Memtet? What's this bracha? It's not really a question. Is Yosef allowed back in? Yosef never left. Yosef's heart was with them the whole time. The question is different. Yosef was told he was going to lead the family. And we all know in Perek Memtet, leadership goes to Yehuda. It doesn't go to Yosef. And then for Perek Memchet was Yaakov saying, I know when you left, we had this vision. You know, Avram picked one son, Yitzchak picked one son, I picked you, you were going to be the chosen one. Things have changed since you left. I'm going to pick in Perek Memtet all 12 of you. So you should know you have a special status. You're the Bechor. From Menashe, Reuven, Shimon. You get two, right? You get two portions of land. You get two sons that are chosen, but you're not the leadership son. You are part of Am Yisrael. And you see that Yosef gets that message because in the next parak, the very end of Sefer Breshit, the brothers bow down to him and say, we'll be your slave. Don't hurt us after Yaakov dies. And his answer is, no, I'm not going to hurt you. I don't want you to be my slaves. I'm part of this family. That's what I've wanted the whole time. I've just wanted to come back to this family. So we have these two very different pictures of the story of Yosef. Did he disconnect and then reconnect, or was he there to connected the entire time, waiting to return to his family? You know, when it comes to Moshe and this week's Parsha, we really have the exact same question. I gave you a chart here just showing you the similarities between the stories of Moshe and Yosef. You know, they're both forced to leave their family and live amongst non-Jews for a long period of time. They both have their sibling watch them taken away, you know, from the family to go amongst the non-Jews. They both grow up or live for a period of time in the palace of Paro. They both work as slaves. I mean, being a shepherd to Yitro is really hard work and probably the lowest job on the totem pole compared to a slave, just like Yosef, who works as a slave in Potiphar's house. They both end up marrying non-Jewish women, Sipporah and Asnat. Both of those women are described as the daughters of a Kohen Midian and Kohen On. And then I threw in a nice midrash about both of them. They were both born Mahul. They were both born with a Brit Milah. So let's do the same thing, but in a quicker form about Moshe Rabbeinu. In this week's Parsha, we're introduced to Moshe, and we all know that he, for 3 months, is hidden by his mother. And then at that point, he is taken by Bat Paro. And when he is raised by Bat Paro, we of course have the question, which is, you know, does he know who he really is? So just to flesh out what I just said, Bat Paro is of course the one who finds him when they put him in the teva. He gets back to his mom. She nurses him until he's weaned. So being weaned is not very old. And that's why we really have this question of, does he know his identity? Did Bat Paro tell him his identity? Did he somehow remember his identity at such a young age? Does he know who he is? And when we look at the psukim, you know, he's named by Bat Paro. He's raised by Bat Paro. It even says she names him Moshe. The question comes up already within the Mefarshim, which is, what does this name represent? If you look at Ibn Ezra, it's an Egyptian name, right? It is a name that represents his new role as an Egyptian. If you look at Chizkuni and many others, no, this is a Jewish name. This is a Hebrew name. And Chizkuni comes out with two different ways how that would be possible. Either Bat Paro Nitgaira, she converts, and therefore she learns Lashon HaKodesh, which would make his mom technically Jewish, which is a really far-fetched but very beautiful way to look at Bat Paro. Or, which I thought was an interesting version of Chizkuni, really Yocheved names him Moshe, meaning for all those years he's living with Yocheved, she didn't give him a name. No, she named him Moshe. And when Bat Paro asks, oh, what is this name? You know, she explains to him Moshe from the Lashon of Hamshacha, continuation. And she says, oh, very beautiful. It also fits what what I would like to say about him, maybe this name was originally given to him by Yocheved, but unclear, is this an Egyptian name or is this a Jewish name? Unclear what he thought when he's growing up, right? In source 31, Moshe grows up and he goes out to his brothers. Which brothers? Are these his Jewish brothers? His Egyptian brothers? Who does he think is his brothers? Ramban says, no, he knows he's Jewish. He knew he was Jewish. And therefore he wants to go out and go see what's going on with his Jewish brothers. Ibn Ezra, no way. He thinks he's Egyptian. Ha-mitzrim. Kiba Armon ha-melech. He grew up in the palace. Of course he thought he's Egyptian brothers. We don't know. We don't know what Moshe thought. Did he associate himself as an Egyptian? Did he associate himself as a Jew? So the first thing we know, he comes outside and he defends a Jew who's being beaten up by an Egyptian. So the question is why? Why does he do that? Says the Ramban, simple. If he thinks he's Jewish, so that's why he defends a Jew. The reason why he kills that Egyptian is because lo yachol lisbol, he couldn't handle the fact that his Jewish brother's being hit. Because this Egyptian is hurting his own brother. Says Sfarno, because of brotherhood. That's my brother that you're hitting. He had to take revenge. Comes Ibn Ezra and says, absolutely not. He thought he was Egyptian. And therefore, when he saw the Egyptian hitting the Jew, it has nothing to do with the fact that he thinks he's Jewish, but rather, the guy was doing something wrong. Moshe was a just person, and therefore you can't do something wrong. You're hitting an older man. How could you do that? Moshe defends the older man. It has nothing to do with the fact that he knows he's Jewish, because according to Ibn Ezra, he really did not know. So as the story continues, right, Moshe then yells one Jew hitting another Jew and ends up Paro wants to kill him and he has to run away. And we're very unclear here. When Moshe's running away, is he blaming the Jew for telling on him? Is he blaming Paro because Paro wants to kill him? Who does Moshe think he is? Who does Moshe blame for why he needs to run away? But when he runs away and he meets Zipporah and sisters at the well, source 34, they come home and they say to their dad, Ish mitzri hatzilani miyad haroim. We were saved by this Egyptian man. And again, we ask the question, why do they call him an Ish mitzri? Is it because when he introduced himself and they said, hi, who are you? He said, I'm an Egyptian man and I'm leaving Egypt. I'm coming to Midian. And they said, very nice, because he associated himself as an Egyptian. Or is it he looked like an Egyptian? So they assumed he was an Egyptian, but it's not that that's how he identified himself. The Psukim then continues. He moves into the house of Yitro, source 35. He stays with the man. Well, is he staying with the man because now he wants a new life? Okay, I give up the Egyptian identity. Now I'm a Midian man, right? I'm staying with this man. I'm staying for a long time. I really want to, be part of this new life. So therefore, he marries the man's daughter, Zipporah. He becomes a Midiani man. And source 36, he has his first child. And this is the only child that's mentioned in Parsha Shemos. Ger hayiti beres nachriya. I was a stranger over there. I was confused over there. I didn't belong over there. Where do I belong? Here. I belong here in Midian. I have a new life. I have a new identity. I am now a Midiani man. Is that what Moshe thought at this point in the story? Or is it possible, source 37, the whole reason he's in Midian is because his father figure, Paro, Vayivakesh laharoget Moshe, and he's running away from Paro, and that's why he's in Midian. He's not in Midian because he wants to be in Midian. He's not in Midian because he associates being Midiani. He needed a place to escape. He needed a place to hide, and therefore he moves to the land of Midian, and he's waiting there only because he has nowhere else to go. He can't go back home, and therefore he gets married while he's there. He meets this really nice woman at the well, and therefore he marries Zipporah, or maybe he marries Zipporah, source 38. According to Ibn Ezra and Rashi, when it says that her father Yitro is Kohen Midian, Yitro haya Kohen Lashem. He found a family that shares his values. He's a Jewish man, and here he is. He finds a guy who, according to Rashi, Parash Lomei Avodah Zarah, also doesn't believe in Avodah Zarah, also believes in Hashem. He finally found a family that he can associate with, so he lives amongst this family. And if you look source 39, I told you in this week's Parsha he only names one child, but we know he has two children because when he leaves, he has two children with him. We just don't know the second name, but we learned they're both their names in Parshas Yitro, and that's in Shmo Perek Yudchet. And if I look at both their names put together, the first one is Ger Hayiti Beretz Nachriya. I was a stranger in a strange land, and again, there's an ambiguity there, which is I'm a stranger in a strange land in Mitzrayim. I'm a stranger in a strange land maybe here in Midian. I'm a stranger here. I don't belong here. I'm here because I have to be here, but I'm not here because this is where I associate myself. And his second name, Kielok Eliezer, Kielokei Avi Bezri Vatzlei Mecher Paro. Right? God has saved me from Paro, meaning on his mind is, why am I here? Because I'm scared of Paro. I'm here because I am in danger to return. I want to return. I want to go back. I want to be part of my nation again, but I'm stuck here because I can't return to my nation because of Paro. And that, of course, takes us to the next story at the sneh, where God says, go back and save the Jewish people. Source number 40. And Moshe says no over and over and over again, till he finally says, Bi Adonai, shalachna v'atishlach, please just send somebody else. And the question here is, if Moshe has associated himself in his new life as being a Midyan person, so what he's saying is, God, this is not my nation. Leave me alone. I am not part of these people. Send anyone else. Don't send me. Or it could be he's saying, I'm too scared, right? Paro is going to kill me. I just can't go. Please send somebody else, which is why afterwards Hashem says, the people want to kill you are dead, right? Because that's really what Moshe's been worried about the whole time. And we see this constant back and forth of what it's possible that Moshe is thinking in all of the psukim, because what does God answer him? Hello, Aaron, achicha Levi, adati kedaber yitaberhu, right? Aaron's going to come and he's going to speak for you and he's going to help you. So if Moshe's scared of Paro, and it's really not about going back to the, meaning it's not that he doesn't want to be part of the Jewish people, he's just scared of Paro. So he's saying, don't worry, Aaron's going to go with you. You're going to have a partner. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. But if Moshe's saying, send somebody else, I'm not Jewish, I'm a Midyan man, leave me alone. So what's Hashem saying? No, you're not. Your brother Aaron is coming. Don't you know? You're Jewish and you have a brother. If you look at Pasuk Yichet, you see the ambiguity even more, because now Moshe is told he's got to go back. So he goes back to Yitro, and look what he says. He says, Yitro, can I ashuva elachai Hashem Mitzrayim? Can I go back to my brothers in Mitzrayim? And here's where you see the ambiguity again. Who are the brothers he's talking about? Is he asking Yitro to go back to the Mitzrim? Is he asking Yitro to go back to the Jews? Or is he being ambiguous so Yitro has no idea? It comes to the Chizkuni to say it is very possible the entire time he was in Midyan, he never told them his true identity. Why? Because who would let a runaway who's supposed to be murdered by Paro into their home? So he hid his identity the whole time. And therefore, when he says, I'm going back to my brothers, we're not sure which brothers he is referring to. And this question of Moshe Rabbeinu, did he see himself as a Midyan person while he was in Midyan? Did he see himself as Jewish? Did he originally see himself as an Egyptian? Really comes to help us to understand a bunch of other stories that come up in this week's Parsha that are so hard to understand. If you look at source 41, Moshe, it seems, takes his wife and his sons and takes them on the camel and seems to take them to Egypt. But as we all know in Parshas Yitro, they're not with him anymore. He sends them away. And the question is, when does he send them away, which we're not going to solve today? Again, that's a share unto itself. But why does he send them away? If you understand Moshe as the entire time he was in Midyan, associating himself as a Midjani, hiding his identity of who he really was, or not really knowing who he really was, until God reveals and says, hello, you're Jewish, get and save the Jewish people. Well, then possibly he has to send his Midyan family away. They don't belong once he becomes the leader of the Jewish people. Or is it the whole time he told them he was Jewish? The whole time they were all on board with his Jewish values. He sends them away to protect them because it's taking too long to leave Mitzrayim. Or the next story that appears in source 42, a few psukim later, where Hashem almost kills him or his son because a son doesn't have a bris milah. And the question is, what is going on there? Why does a son of Moshe Rabbeinu not have a bris milah? But if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't really associate himself as a Jewish person, then it makes sense his son doesn't have a bris milah. You know, Shadal says he gave his oldest son a bris milah at the age of 13 because he thought he was a Midyan person, keeping their values, and that's why his younger son didn't have bris milah yet. He didn't hit 13. Or is it that he didn't give him bris milah because he was hiding identity from Yitro, and therefore he couldn't give him bris milah? Or is it that the baby was only 8 days old, so he didn't give bris milah yet? All of these questions are dealing with our core question of who did Moshe think he was the entire time that he was in Midyan, and who did he associate himself with? And this question, I think, plagues us as we go through all of the stories of Moshe, and it's entirely unclear what Moshe really thought while he was going through this process until he returns and, of course, reassociates himself to the Jewish people. And therefore, I go back to my original question to which I started, which is, why did God insist that it had to be Moshe Rabbeinu? What was it about Moshe Rabbeinu that made it that he has to be our leader? That even when he says, I can't do it, and he gives excuse after excuse, God is like, too bad, it's got to be you. Well, if I understand it from the perspective of Ramban and the perspective of Chizkuni, this is a person who grew up in the palace, and then ran away to Midian, and the entire time held strong. I am part of the Jewish people. I am part of the Jewish people, and I'm going to return to the Jewish people as soon as I can. Well, then that makes sense. That person deserves to be the leader of the Jewish people. That is a really hard thing to do. And Moshe Rabbeinu holding strong to those values the entire time makes a ton of sense. But if I want to argue that during that time, Moshe really didn't know that he was Jewish, or Moshe did not associate himself with the Jewish people until he was forced to by the Stan, and of course had that turnaround, why is Moshe Rabbeinu chosen? And I want to take you to source 44, which is one of the most beautiful, I think, Ibn Ezra's that really asks this question, because Ibn Ezra is the one who holds this way and gives three very different answers. And I think all three are true, and they're all very, very strong. I'm going to do them out of order. I'm going to do one, then three, and then two. Okay, so he says as follows. First answer: Ulai sivev Hashem זה שיגדל משה בבית המלכות להיות נפשו המדרגה העליונה בדרך הלימוד והרגילות ולא תהיה שפלה ורגילה להיות בית עבדים. Answer number one is God needed a leader that didn't grow up in slavery, that didn't have a slave mentality. He needed somebody to lead Am Yisrael who grew up in a palace, who grew up in this higher level of knowing what it means to be free, because it's hard to visualize freedom when you grow up in slavery. And therefore the leader of Am Yisrael had to have that vision, had to have that ability to know what it meant to be free, to spread that dream to Am Yisrael. We can be free. We can be a free nation. And that's why Moshe was chosen, says Ibn Ezra, possibility number one. If I look to number three, I always love this answer. O davar acher, ki ilu haya gadal ben achav ve'ekru min ne'orav, lo hayu yireim mimenu, ki yachshavu ka'achad mehem. I think it's an issue that a lot of people have as well, which is sometimes when you grow up amongst people and everyone's like, oh, I knew you back then. I remember when you wore diapers. I remember what you were like back then. Nobody's scared of you. Nobody listens to you because you're one of us. You know, I knew you when you were a kid. So God had to choose. If he wanted someone that Am Yisrael would respect, it had to be someone who they didn't know when he was young. He grew up in a different situation. He grew up far away from them. They have no memories of him as a little baby, and therefore they could respect him as an 80-year-old adult who's coming to be their leader. But my favorite answer, and again, I think Ibn Ezra is saying all three answers, not 1, 2, or 3. It's 1, 2, and 3 is number 2. Because why does he kill that Egyptian? It's not because he thought you're killing a Jewish brother. It's because you're doing something that is wrong. Why does he save Sipporah and her sisters from the shepherds? Because they were doing something wrong. They were stealing the water. Moshe was someone who stops people who are doing things that are wrong. Moshe stands up, even if it means he's going to get thrown out of the palace, even if it means somebody might try to kill him, even if it might mean, think about it, he fought lots of shepherds. They could have attacked him. They could have killed him. It doesn't matter. Moshe stands up for the downtrodden. Moshe stands up for people who need his help. And that's exactly what Bnei Israel needed somebody with a leadership quality like him. There's this beautiful midrash in Shemot Rabbah that describes this exact quality of Moshe Rabbeinu in such a beautiful way, telling a really beautiful story. Source 45. So there was a story that one day Moshe was shepherding a sheep of Yitro in the Midbar in the desert. And one of the goats ran away. And he runs away, and what Moshe discovers is the Gedi ends up running away to drink, right? He goes to find this pool of water and he starts to drink. Instead of Moshe getting mad because the goat ran away, I feel so bad. I didn't know that the reason you were running away was because you were thirsty, and you must not be tired. So he picks up the Gedi and puts him on his shoulders and carries him back, right? And that's when Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, you have so much mercy to act this way towards the sheep of somebody that's not yours even. It's not even your sheep. It's the sheep of this other guy, the sheep of Yitro. I swear you're going to be the leader of my sheep, my flock, the Jewish people. And that's why Moshe was chosen. So what I wanted to show you today is that really there are two very, very different ways to look at the stories of Moshe Rabbeinu and Yosef, especially in the time of their stories, which is a long period of time, 22 years or more of Yosef life and majority of the life of Moshe, when they are living not amongst the Jewish people, when they are living outside of the Jewish people, when they are living in their own galut. And in those situations, we really have two very different pictures. Yosef, who is thrown away and sold by his brothers, and he really picks himself up and forgets about his brothers. And he tries to move on and make the best of his life, create a new dream, create a new leadership for himself, create a new life for himself. And then when the brothers come, he doesn't want them back. And then he realizes he does. And then everything changes and he makes his goal to save Am Yisrael at that point. Or is it a man who's sold from his family and just can't wait to return to them, can't wait to be part of them again, and is waiting the day that he can be able to return to them, and he has to teach them a lesson, or he has to see if they're sorry, or whatever it is. He needs to make them do tshuva, or he needs to make them understand what he went through, whatever it is. But he can't wait till the day that he returns to them, and he's held on to that dream the entire time. When it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, grew up in the palace, and it could be that he associates himself as an Egyptian. He moves to Midian, and now he associates himself as a Midiani. And then that day at the Sneh, God says to him, you know what? It's time to come home, and it's time to be part of Am Yisrael once again, and it's time to lead Am Yisrael. And he has to make that choice to leave his old life, to leave his old values, and turn to become the leader of the Jewish people. Or is it he grew up in the palace, but he knew he was Jewish, and therefore he was always looking out of the palace windows, trying to figure out how he can help his Jewish brothers. And then he finally helps them, and then of course it gets him into trouble, and he has to run away, and now he's stuck because he can't come back because his life is in trouble, and he's waiting until the day that he can return and be able to save his family. And I really do think that when I look at these two versions, why is it that the text is written in such an ambiguous way? Like, why is it not clear to us which one they thought? And I think the answer is probably what I think is the truth here, is that there's intentional ambiguity, because probably what is true here is somewhere in the middle. They probably were confused. They were probably confused. Think about it from the perspective of Moshe. I went out to my brothers. I don't know who's my brother. On the one hand, I'm Jewish biologically. On the other hand, I'm living amongst the Egyptians. I'm not sure who's my brothers. I'm going back to my brothers. I'm so confused, Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm living this double life and I'm confused. He struggled. Yosef, I want to go back to my family, but they sold me as a slave. I'm so confused. What do I want to do? Do I want to be part of them? Do I not? I really think what the Psukim are doing is capturing for us the confusion of these two characters. They really feel the pull in both directions. Do I want a new life? Do I want my old life? And it's a struggle for them to try to figure out which is the life they actually want. And of course, at the end of that struggle, they both choose to be part of Am Yisrael, not just part of Am Yisrael, leaders of Am Yisrael, people who save Am Yisrael, and of course, become the Moshe and the Yosef that we all know. But what I would like to say is that, of course, we learn a lot from Moshe and Yosef when they become those powerful leaders and when they save everybody. Moshe who saves Am Yisrael from Mitzrayim, Yosef who saves the world and the Jewish people from famine. But what we can also learn from is their struggle. That story in the middle, that story when they're not sure what their identity is, that story when they're kind of confused and living in a confusing situation. That's where we also can learn from, because I think we live in confusing situations. We live in a life where there's multiple values coming through us. We live in a life of galus where there are all these different things that are thrown our way. And I think there's a lot to learn from the fact that they did struggle, from the fact that they did question their identity, from the fact that they grew within that identity, that allows us the opening for us to ask questions, for us to question our values, for us to struggle, for us to grow, and to mimic the lives of Moshe and Yosef. Everyone, thank you very, very much for joining me today. I'll certainly open the floor for questions if there are any, but thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. She's been listening on the floor, so she wanted to come.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night. If anybody wants the source sheet, send me an email and I'm happy to
Thank you,
send it to
Nechama.
Thank
you, Nechama. That was wonderful.
Very powerful.
Thank you. Hey, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.